Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Book Café. This is a forum for authors, readers, and scholars. Today we have Dr. Samuel Oyewole, and we intend to engage him on one of his books titled Utilitarianism in Outer Space, Space Policy, Socioeconomic Development, and Security Strategies in Nigeria and South Africa. If this is I have a copy of the book here. Very nice cover. I hope you're able to get yours too to read also. Just a brief about Dr. Oyewole. He's a research fellow at the African Center for the Study of the United States. That may sound strange for some of us, but there's actually, in fact, I think there are actually two of such centers in Africa that is dedicated to US studies. But there are also something similar like that in the US where they study maybe African studies or African affairs. So he's a research fellow there, but he's also engaged with the Ocean Region program. Both of them are the Department of Political Science at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. He's also a lecturer at the Department of Political Science, Federal University, Oyekiti, that's in southwest Nigeria. His research interests cover African affairs, aerospace, defense and strategic studies, crisis management, ocean governance, development studies, and international relations. He's published very widely. His articles have appeared in many journals, including Astropolitics, African Security Review, um, African Conflict and Peace Building Review, Defense and Security Analysis, Defense Studies, Democracy and Security, South African Journal of International Affairs, just to mention a few. He's also published a couple of books, and we will be discussing one of his books, like I mentioned before, Utilitarianism in Outer Space. Yeah, another book which he has written is titled Power Politics in Africa, Nigeria and South Africa in Comparative Perspective. Thanks everyone for joining us, and I'm looking forward to a fruitful engagement today, both with Dr. Yewale, but amongst all of us as a whole. So you are welcome to participate in the discussion. You can use the chat box, or because it's going to be an interactive session. So if you want to use the chat box, or if you want to raise your hand, and then I call you to make your contribution. So, Dr. Iwole, maybe to start the discussion, would you like to tell us a bit about your background and how you ventured into space policy and geopolitics?
Okay, thank you so much for having me today. Um, yeah, my background is in political science. I have my first degree in political science and international relations from Osun State University. And then I had my second degree in political science from University of Ilorin in Nigeria. And then I had my PhD in international relations from Northwest University in South Africa. So my background is consistently in political science. So my first encounter or interest in space can be traced back to my high school or secondary school. Then we had to pick between government and geography. So I picked government. Then in my, we call it SS, senior secondary school in Nigeria. So in SS2, I I happened to repeat my first year in secondary school, so I had to do a lot of catch up to meet with my colleagues. So after completing YX syllabus in SS1, I did not really have it much to read again. So I started reading what is outside my curriculum. So I started reading physics and geography and some other things. So those things gave me background to what later becomes interest in science generally. My interest gave me the foundation for my interest in science, policy, and emerging technology. So after my MSc, I work on a paper, and that's the genesis of my interest in my research interest in space. I wrote a paper that was later published by Studying Conflict and Terrorism, and the title is Making the Sky Relevant to Battle Strategy. So the paper focused exclusively on air power. So as at then, the issue of war against Boko Haram was still very on top of the news. There are so many papers and write-up on the war against Boko Haram and Boko Haram, or very few scholars are paying attention to the role of the Air Force and beyond the ground forces. So I pick interest. I developed my own catalog of news reports for 2 years and published my first work on air power. Then I realized that I can do more than air power. I can look beyond the air and write something on space. Then I started writing on my first paper on space in 2015. It was presented in a conference in 2016, then published by Astropolitics in 2017. That was my first paper, Space Policy. The title of that paper was Space Research and Development in Africa. It was like an overview of the ecosystem on the continent. So then the same year, I developed a proposal on that for my PhD. I was interested in doing my PhD in space. Then I did my PhD on space policy. So then I wrote more work on and made further study on this area. Then I moved from the civil space to the military dimension. I noticed that more people are taking interest in the civil dimension of the space program on the continent, but nobody is talking about the military dimension. And I wrote my first work in that area in 2020, that was published in 2020. So that was, and it was published by the South African Journal of International Affairs. And then when the Oxford book on space security, when they started that project, I was contacted, can you contribute something also on Africa? Then I did a follow-up study where I looked at how Pan-Africanism and realism is driving the military dimension of space program in Africa, which came out as a chapter in that book on African realism and military space programs. So, and I did some other work like commentaries and news opinion piece in some outlet in some outlet. So these are some of the things I that actually inspired and some of my track record in this area. But generally, space is just one dimension of my research interest. I'm also interested in ocean governance, issue of air power and air warfare, issue of the land warfare, and generally issue of development study, science policy and emerging technology like AI, our latest work was and then on autonomous weapon systems. So generally, my interest is a bit beyond issue of outer space. But outer space is a major component of my research interest.
Well, sounds really cool. You mentioned two things. Okay, okay, you mentioned several things, but let me just bring attention to two: air power, space power. Air power looks appears a bit closer. I mean, it's a bit vivid, as in your ability to maybe have to use your planes or helicopters or whatever high altitude platforms for warfare. So that's why you have the Air Force. When you say space power, what does it entail?
Okay, when we say space power, it's just that means we are talking about the political dimension now, because in political science and specifically international relation, the realists believe that power state power is a major determinant factor in state behavior. So the arrangement of power, how powerful a country is, also affects their security architecture and their assumption about their own security in relation to other countries. So power in the sense is like the quality and quantity of capability and applicability of some of the applicability of such capability to change the behavior of others, either state or non-state actor, or to affect the outcome of a process or a particular situation. So ability to change the action of others or to influence or affect the direction of or trajectories of event or process, it can be referred to as power. And then when we talk about space power, generally we talk about countries like the US, who has US is so critical to many countries as space access today, either through the use of SpaceX rockets, some other countries that are also leading space power, like like Russia, like China, like UK, France, South Korea, North Korea, and so many other countries. But in general, we focus more attention on all this leading power and ignore emerging powers or emerging players, as we prefer to refer to his to the hierarchize this involvement in space program. And that's why the title of the book is utilitarianism. It's about utility, not about power, not about ego. So it's about the utility. What's the benefits for this country in terms of security, in terms of influence, in terms of development? What's the contribution of space? It's not just about we want to launch, we want to be part of them, we want to be counted as one of the countries that has done this. So that's the general idea behind this.
I'll come back to this issue of space power because there are a couple of wars going on right now, and there has been this aspect of space being involved. Like the Russia-Ukraine war, how Starlink
Mm.
is involved, and then there's also this talk about the Iron Dome also is currently in the news. But like
Yeah.
since you've already brought in the book, maybe we should start discussing some things within the book. You've already kind of try to explain maybe what utilitarianism means. There's
Yeah.
also another one of the concepts in the book is what you call utilitarian theory. Would you like to expatiate on that?
Utilitarian theory is a popular theory in philosophy, in political science, and in economics. Most students of economics will have come across utilitarian theory is a popular theory in economics, but it has its origin in philosophy of Jeremy Bentham and so many other leading philosophers or scholars of 17th, 18th century, and even before them. There are so many authors that have written on utilitarianism. The simple idea about utilitarianism is that the cost, the benefit should outweigh the cost. And cost benefit analysis is a variant of utilitarianism. But I use multiple dimensions of utilitarianism in the book. I use end utilitarianism. I use the idea of act utilitarianism. The action itself must be justified by utility. It must be designed to produce utility, to benefit the actors that are involved or the concerned parties that are involved. Beyond act utilitarianism, we have motive utilitarianism, whereby the motivation behind the action is also designed or framed to be utilitarian, not egoistic. So, motive utilitarianism. Again, I use the idea of institutional utilitarianism and so many other dimensions of utilitarianism. But the central idea is that the benefit should be the central driver, the benefits to be derived from action. So every action, every policy, every decision Every investment should be driven by utility. What's the benefit that the concerned party will derive from that particular investment, from that policy, from that project? And that's why utilitarianism tends to capture my idea or my interest in the book. There's so many other theories of international relations as a student of international relations, like realism, liberalism, so many theories. Some people, in Africa, we are so fond of this theory of Africa agency. But the central point is what's the benefit? Either in time of power, either in time of profit, either in time of anything. It is still about benefit, either tangible or intangible benefit, either in time of hard or soft power, either in time of financial, political, social, cultural dimension of the benefit. It's still about benefit. So it's about utility. And that's what informs the concept of utilitarianism and its usage in this book.
Can you use this theory to explain the interest of a couple of African countries to procure small satellites? And I use the word procure. They are not developing it from their countries. Maybe they are buying it, or maybe some students that maybe went to school abroad and design or building a satellite is part of their project. So can you use, and then the country, of course, claims that it's a national satellite. Can you use the theory to explain this interest by African countries?
Definitely, definitely, because when you look at it generally, it also provides this country the basic entry point into space program. There are so many African countries, especially when we look back into maybe in the 90s. Many African countries use byproducts or product of space technology, like satellite data extracted from other countries. But their access is limited to what is available. Now, building or purchasing a satellite and having the tracking station in their country give them the first opportunity to relate more closely with this technology. Then they can learn the basics of extraction, the downstream dimension of the satellite, how it works. Then is the entry point for this country. Then this will serve as a motivation for many of their citizens or many citizens in this country to pick more interest, to be inspired, to develop more. It will challenge the imagination of the young ones, young scientists. And many, it may look very little, but this may go a long way to encourage many people in that country to aspire for more. We have some big companies today that just started as imagination. We have many top professors today leading in their various fields that their idea about the field only started with imagination, one event leading to the other. I remember when Nigeria launched its first satellite in 2003, the discussion around us, especially those that happens to know better than we do then, talked about how wasteful it was. And so many, we had different divided opinion, not knowing that we today will become maybe a policy analyst in this area. But it gave us the first insight. Imagine that Nigeria is just launching its first satellite. There are so many missed opportunities in time of time lag that we have had by now. And again, imagine that Nigeria's first satellite was launched in 1970. Possibly we will be at a different stage of development by now. And that happens, that is applicable to many other countries. Because it will always be challenging imagination of the new generation or coming generation to do better. Now the US is going back to the moon. That has been done by the previous generation. But the ultimate objective is to go to Mars and to go beyond and to go back to the moon, not just to land human being on the moon, but to go there to stay. So what has been achieved in the past is challenging the present generation to do better. That you're not just going to step on the moon. but go there and occupy the moon. And that shows that every little progress matters. For country like Russia now, that is yet to land human being on the moon, the objective cannot be to land human being tomorrow and then occupy the moon. But first to successfully land human being on the moon. So that little progress is very important. And in terms of utility, it's very critical to human capital development, to develop the labor force, the intellectual basis for further progress in that area. So it may look insignificant, but it's very important. But I think we can do better, especially collectively as a continent.
Well, this is a very nice perspective. Okay, we've dived a lot into the title. Let's look at the subtitle a bit more. Let me ask, what is the link between space policy, socioeconomic development, and national security?
There's so many connecting factors there, so many. And I identify so many indicators in the book. In terms of space policy, I identify so many things like the space tech, the policy and strategic paper, the implementation, different capabilities that are involved, the capacity of the countries, both Nigeria and South Africa, in terms of institutional capacity, the workforce, the investment that has been made by these two countries, and other indicators of space policy are clearly identified in the book. Beyond that, under socioeconomic indicators, I identify so many things that fall under national development, the traditional conception of development, as well as human development. And under national development, we have the likes of economic growth, investment, the likes of economic transformation, and so on. But under human development, we have the likes of environmental security, environmental concern. We have the likes of education. What I did at the end of the day was to match the idea of human development and human security together. So what I tried to say, I separated national security and national development from the fusion between human and human development and security. So under human development and security, we have a life of environmental security, food security, issue of education, and human capital development, and so many other factors, including international cooperation, identify disaster management, internal security, and external dimension of security, defense, capture under national security. So the connection is that space technology provide ample support for some of these efforts in terms of under urban and regional planning, for instance. Satellite data is very key to planning in modern time for urban and regional planning. And I identified so many instances from Nigeria and South Africa where satellite data have supported decision-making in planning urban center in both countries. And again, road construction in Nigeria have benefited from satellite data mapping and so on. Maritime security also benefited from this idea of space support. South Africa has a constellation of 3 satellites, mainly designed for maritime situation awareness. So to support policy making, policy and strategic planning and actions around the maritime domain, knowing fully well that South Africa is the only African country that have access to the 3C. They have stake in 3C. That's the Pacific, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and the Southern Ocean. So managing and observing, monitoring this vast sea domain require beyond the ground-based radar to have eye up there. So that's why satellite data is very key to situation awareness, even at the maritime domain. Nigeria satellite has supported counter-terrorism, counter-insurgency, counter-banditry, the war against maritime piracy, illegal fishing, and so on in Nigerian water and the Gulf of Guinea. So in time of the peacekeeping as well, these two countries have used their satellite data to support their forces involved in external operation, especially in peacekeeping, South African peacekeeping in DRC, as well as Nigerian involvement in Mali and some Sudan and some other countries. So again, in disaster management, early warning system, satellite is very important, providing satellite data to disaster management team. Nigerian satellite have played major role in this area. So beyond that, in time of economic transformation, the South African space industry, the ecosystem is a bit more developed than many other African countries, given the number of companies that are involved in different production of different spare parts. I identify extensive list of some of the companies that are involved in South Africa and what they are doing, their contribution, some of their assessment of their performance, both financial and technical performance. Some of them have produced and supplied to about 40. There's a particular company I identify that has then have supplied more than 40 countries different spare parts for satellite and other stuff. And some of these companies also have, some of their products are also relevant in other industry. So, and that's why they are key to economic transformation and economic growth. It's only recently that Nigeria is having companies that are really involved or really taking interest in aerospace sector with a recent agreement between the government of Nigeria and Proforce. So all these are connection between space policy, socioeconomic development, and then security. In terms of education is very key. It shows that Nigerian satellite data has been supplied to several universities within the country, which is very important for capacity building. You can imagine in this generation, if we still have students of urban and regional planning anywhere on the continent, or students of environmental study or climate, geography, and the rest of them, that don't have access to data, that cannot even read satellite data to project or to predict events or to make policy. That would be too bad for this generation. So satellite data has provided some of these students with capacity and which they can actually build on in future or in the meantime. So in terms of capacity building is very key. I'm aware of a number of programs run by SANSA in support of different universities in terms of initiative to support space study and cognate study, environmental study, mapping of, even during COVID-19, SANSA sponsored a particular project to use satellite data to map certain things, to map lockdown details and so on within South Africa. So these are things that satellite data provide. Our space policy make it possible for us to access knowingly or unknowingly. Again, the space policy of this country are broader and far beyond their investment into the sector directly, like the number of satellites they have. Their policy also include licensing companies, foreign companies or multinationals to operate. So it's also key, and we all have access to internet now. Some of them are space supported. We don't care because we have access to it, and we don't really know whether we should appreciate space for that or the policy or not. So you can see tons or a number of people, thousands of people that are into Uber, to boat and all this sector now. They have access to GPS. They have access to internet almost everywhere now. All this is connected to decision and policy that has been made by policymakers of relevant countries to make this kind of technology and application accessible to the common people. Because these are critical, because there are countries across the world, there are few countries across the world that are totally close to the outside world where you don't enjoy some of these benefits. And that's why space policy and general socioeconomic policy of a country, as well as foreign policy of a country, defense policy, and so on, matters in integration. The grand strategy of that country matters, and all these policies that form the grand strategy are so important in the general framework of things.
Let me pick you up on that last point, the issue of space policy, especially when it comes to the policy document. How important is it to have maybe say a national space policy, whether it's a document or any other form, for the development of space in that country? For example, South Africa that you mentioned, South Africa space industry developed far ahead of before the country adopted a national policy document. So where does space policy come in?
Okay, thank you so much for that. Sometimes we reduce space policy to the policy paper, which is not always true. A policy is entirely, it involves both actions and document, statement, because it's far beyond the document. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's not a single document that actually, if you look at the style I adopted in reviewing the space policy of that country, of the two countries, I first reviewed the historical development, because so many other policies have been formulated in the past that contributed to the space policy. A number of institutions were established ahead of the space policy document of the two countries. South Africa have made so many efforts. They may not feature as space policy. The title of the document may not be space policy, or certain policy have been made earlier, either defense policy, either security policy, either one telecommunication policy. All those policies have some space dimension. That at the end of the day, the space policy was just meant to aggregate those things together, to bring them together and make them concise. South Africa already have SANSA even before the space policy program was already have a number of organizations that are involved in space policy ahead of the adoption of space policy in South Africa and establishment of SANSA. Many efforts have been made. Capacity building have been in place even as far back as 1990s. The first satellite of the country was launched in 1998. Far ahead, more than a decade ahead of the so-called space policy. The discussion around military satellites in South Africa, can be traced back to 2003, 2006, when the contracts between Russia and South Africa can be dated back to that period. However, it's only after that time that we had this kind of program that is dedicated to space. So it's not about a single document called space policy. It involves actions. And it also involves some classified document that we don't have access to. Not everything that is, not every government policy that is accessible to the public. So it's only the version that the government wants us to know or want us to see that we'll see. So there are some minutes of meeting that is more important than that space policy document that we are reading. There is a guiding principle for those within that are policymakers compared to those of us that we don't have access to some of these documents.
Very true.
Nigerian Defense Space Agency was only established recently. That was in 2014 or so, 2016, 2014, 2016. However, the idea of collaboration between the space agency and the Nigerian military dated back much earlier. In fact, there are records. I had the opportunity of reading a book authored by the commandant, one of the commandant of the Nigerian peacekeeping operation in Sierra Leone and in Liberia. He documented how they use satellite communication in 1990s, showing that some of these things are ahead of the so-called policy document that we all know. So it's not about a single document.
Yeah.
But having that single document has been considered by many scholars as part of an attempt to build a coherent space program, because it makes it easier to coordinate institutions and efforts instead of having disparate efforts that are not well integrated and well developed to achieve a single or set of goals.
Right. That's nice. That's thanks. You've already given us some lecture on space policy. That's fine. Okay, so let me pivot and the question really is, why did you focus on Nigeria and South Africa? In the African Union, there's what they call these big five. There's Egypt, there is Algeria, and there are some other countries that have space programs. So why did you really focus on Nigeria and South Africa?
Okay, when I started the project, my intention was to focus on sub-Saharan Africa or the entire continent. But then it was not easy to do field work in all these countries because of funding. So I decided to restrict myself to two countries as a case study to showcase African experiences and perspective. So, yeah, and if you look at my first work on space, it covered the entire continent. It was like an overview of the entire continent. So it was on that basis that I selected two countries. And there are so many factors that inform that decision. One, Nigeria had one of the most institutionalized space programs in the entire continent. In most cases, Nigeria will establish institutions before starting program. Nigeria place so much emphasis on institutions. When South African space launched its first satellite, it took South Africa more than a decade to launch SANSA, South African Space Program. However, Nigeria realized the need to have the agency before the policy paper and before other actions that activities that came after that. So Nigeria has one of the most institutionalized space programs on the continent. I think the first country to have civil space agency, and then the first country to have a defense space institution, like when openly known. So, and then you have a South Africa that is the most industrialized space player on the continent. So it offered me the opportunity to study a market-led example and state-led example. And we cannot see the comparison. One is dominated by markets, like so many companies are involved. In addition to university that play prominent role in South African space program. But in Nigeria, we have state-dominated. The commercial, even the so-called commercial space program is led by NINCOMSAT. So they are like two distinct examples that offer us the opportunity to learn the diversity that we have on the continent.
That's fine. How will you describe cooperation between the two countries? What is the health in terms of space cooperation between the two countries?
In terms of cooperation, I will prefer to describe the relationship between South Africa generally as competition and cooperation. So that's my general assessment of the relationship between the continent. And that's why in my last work on the defense space program on the continent, I prefer to use the theory of African realism, where I try to blend Pan-Africanism with realism. Why this country compete, they still see each other as brothers. And that applies to many other African countries. Sometimes we compete, sometimes, but in most cases, we still see each other as brothers, sisters. They are our brothers over there, sisters over there. We still have commitment to African spirit. And the desire to cooperate is still very strong, despite the competition. So, in terms of space, South Africa and Nigeria are member of a disaster management constellation that also involve Algeria and Kenya. So, showing element of cooperation. South Africa and Nigeria also play major roles in the establishment of an African Space Agency. And then Nigeria is hosting African Center in Ife, the English version of this UN African Center for Space Study, Basic Space Study in Ife. The other one is in Algeria. So in addition, and that has offered many African countries the opportunity to visit and learn from this center. In addition to that, South Africa has so many universities that are both beneficiary to Nigerians and other Africans who have visited South Africa on education, tourism, to learn and then to give back to their country. So there's an element of competition, there's element of cooperation. One of the elements of competition that I noticed, although the competition is unspoken, it's like unmentioned. You don't mention it, but it's still there. You can see the traces. In 2014, it became public that South Africa was about to have, before the launch of the military satellite, Condor E2, in Russia, the South African military satellite. As soon as it was made public, it was leaked by a DA member of parliament. Immediately that news became public. It was not too far from there. Nigeria had announced the establishment of a defense space agency, which later becomes the Defense Space Administration. And although it's unspoken rivalry, but it's a form of competition. But it's a brotherly competition because we still work together on so many areas to move the continent forward. So I will not like to describe it as full cooperation. It also involves competition. And competition in this sense does not really mean that competition in the militaristic Cold War sense of competition. It also involves competition for influence, competition to help other African countries. Because that's why when there is a crisis in one part of Africa, you see so many African countries that are willing to support, either in time of deploying troops as for peacekeeping, or in time of providing one other support or the other, or provide a negotiator, or facilitate negotiation, or offer their country as a place where you can come together to negotiate. So it is a competition to make Africa better. So there's element of competition and there's element of cooperation.
Thank you. Okay, participants, you can actually join the conversation. You can maybe use the chat box, or if you want to speak, you can raise your hand. There are two questions from Natasha. One, it says the perceived slowness of implementation of ambitious objectives set by policymakers. In your opinion, what challenges still persist in the practical implementation on the ground? For example, you mentioned the ARMC. I mean, that's even at a continental level. That project did not really gain traction per se. So, what are the issues, both at the national level and at the continental level?
Okay. Do you want me to address it now?
Yeah.
Okay. Generally, my work is situated at the intersection of politics, policy, and strategy. And in most cases, when we talk about the challenges, it's mostly political than strategic. You have perfect strategy that are not well implemented, or that political hindrances affect the implementation. So, for instance, let me give you one example. In 1970s, Samuel Okoye, who was considered to be the first African citizen to hold a PhD in astronomy or astrophysics. He had this grant from the US to install the first major observatory and some other equipment in UNN. But because of the fact that Nigeria just had a civil war where that region was involved, the political support was limited for that project. The project ended without anything happening because of the security concern and the political concern around that time. At the same time, few years after that, the government of the day voted about $10 million to kickstart a space program that was well announced to the whole world, and Nigeria is soon starting a space program. But because those that were supposed to be the key people that were supposed to be involved were not involved, the project did not see the light of the day. So in most cases, politics affect progress of programs, of space program. And the politics is not only local, it can also be global politics or international politics. It can also be regional politics. And that partly explains the transition, what happened to South African space program during transition. The likes of the decision to abandon at a point, if I can use that word, abandon, or to halt the progress in terms of development of rocket and launch system. It was a combination of internal and international political pressure. So politics play a major role. And when it comes to regional level, there's so many of national level politics that also influence this decision. Many head of government, ministers and representatives of different African countries will agree to something in Addis Ababa or anywhere they decided to meet. But at the end of the day, they get back home. Those that are at the helm of affair are not interested in what you have agreed upon, or they are interested, but there's no funding for you. So you have to just go there and talk and come back. So in most cases, we turn this program or some of this conversation to talking shop instead of concrete activities. So I think politics is very important, and politics is one of the major barrier or challenges that we have in this consideration.
Okay. The second part of our question, it says, do you think the current trade laws or frameworks, whether it's bilateral or multilateral, would it support any advancement of Nigerian and South African space goals?
If we talk about current trade law or trade framework, these are issues that inform technology. And in most cases, every country across the world always find a way to restrict something that they consider to be of security concern, especially sales and who have access to their technology. And that's why you see, as powerful as the US is, US have restriction on sharing space technology. And that's the major reason why China cannot be part of International Space Station, because of security concern. So, but in terms of the current trade arrangement, I think South Africa have better hedge because South Africa is involved in production of certain space technology, which Nigeria for now, Nigeria is not really involved in commercial production of any major space technology beyond possibly satellite data, which is also limited in its competitiveness at the international level. So in terms of trade, the capacity of Nigeria is still limited, but South Africa has so many things to offer in terms of production of satellite spare parts, training of engineers, and sharing of technology, as well as sales of satellite, possibly building and sales of satellites to other African countries. And then, in my opinion, I think Africa will do better when we adopt a model that is also applicable to some European countries. Although we look at ASA like like the center of decision making, but when it comes to commercialization, see that it's mainly few countries coming together to form a bigger company that work for them. And those companies dominate Europe in production of different things, from aerospace to other sector. And that's why you see coming together of some of the leading African countries will actually help in this area. When I say leading, it does not necessarily mean by their size. It can be, for example, coming together of Nigeria, South Africa, Rwanda. I'm just saying, for example, to invest in certain area of space and say, let's come together and work on this together. What's your unique advantage? What's my unique advantage? Then other African countries can key into this, for which is more beneficiary to them. So for any African country purchasing a small satellite from China, Japan, can result back to other African countries that have come together, then invest into that kind of company as a shareholder. Even if it is just 1% share, you're also a shareholder. So if you buy from that kind of company, you are contributing back to Africa. So I believe Africa should explore possibility of having transnational corporations or multinational corporation owned by different countries or shareholder across different countries. We should explore the option of African corporations. This will do better than having small companies or small program here and there. It will do better in terms of contributing back to the continent. So in terms of trade regulation or framework, we still have a long way to go, especially from the continental point of view. Most African countries still prefer to go and buy from China, from UK, from France, than to consider South Africa, which produce some of the things they actually require. Egypt is also developing its capacity in this area. So bringing some of these things closer and allowing us to see more Africanity, the brotherhood part of Africanism and realism will actually help the continent.
Okay, there's a question from Omawai Modupe. It says, you should give an example of utilitarianism in real life. I'm not sure whether it
Okay.
has to do with application of space in real life or whether it's utilitarianism in general as an economic principle.
Okay, utilitarianism in real life just have to be anything that benefits you. Like your decision as individual, you can judge your decision based on how much benefit you are able to extract from it. So it has cost benefit dimension. It has, I think I explained this earlier. That we have different dimensions of utilitarianism. The act utilitarianism, which assess action. We have motive utilitarianism. We have institutional utilitarianism. And we have cost benefit analysis and so many other forms of utilitarianism. So it's just about the central objective is the benefit. What's the benefit that you are extracting from that decision you are taking, from that action you are taking, from the policy, from the activities, from the investment, and so on? It's about the benefit, assessing the benefit.
Okay, Israel, I see your hand up. Israel.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, very well, yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oyewole, for that powerful presentation. My name is Israel Ogudumila. I'm a PhD student from the University of Kansas. My research focuses on aviation history, right? And while you were talking, actually, I had so many questions, but while you were answering other questions, especially the ones coming from Natasha, you've actually answered so many of them. However, I'm curious to know, as we all know, space, aeronautics, aviation is a very capital-intensive sector. And considering the fact that many African countries are limited in terms of capital, these may not be at the forefront of their policy or of what they were trying or what they are presently trying to do. right? Now that you've given us so many benefits of space technology, what do you think will be an hindrance to, some African countries who are willing or who are planning to get into space tech, right? Do you think that there are some geopolitical gatekeeping in terms of space tech? Are there some, what are those hindrances that would inhibit African countries or smaller in terms of capital, smaller African countries to benefit from space tech? And then secondly, I'm curious to know what your opinion would be on, how much control Nigeria and South Africa has on their space tech. For example, especially in the light, in the light of the recent killing that just happened in Benue. Um, Curious to know what are those benefits that space tech brought to the Nigerian Air Forces or the Defense Forces or the Armed Forces to to prevent some of these things, and to also think that Boko Haram has been there for forever. Um, it makes me question how much control does the forces actually have, because if they actually have a total control of the space, and the Nigerian space can be monitored, so why then is Boko Haram very difficult to locate, and why then is space tech struggling to uh, contribute to eliminating these issues?
Okay,
Thank you very much.
okay, thank you. Let's also hear from Harrison, and then because of time, so that you just take everything together. Harrison?
Yeah, thank you for taking my question, and thank you for your presentation as well. So I'm definitely I'm kind of coming at things from more of an environmental perspective. I'm very interested in space um, for its power to affect the energy sector, and there's a number of technologies that really excite me in particular, but more broadly, it seems like space definitely has space has an exploration in general has a very it creates an opportunity to widen wealth disparities between like the richest nations in the world and many sub-Saharan African countries. In particular, I think that when it comes to developing like clean energy technologies, like solar and wind, a lot of the precious metals are being extracted from African nations like the Congo, but those profits from those new energy methods are not being fed back into those nations, and that just exacerbates wealth gaps and things of that nature. I guess my question is, how can we prevent a dynamic like that from erupting when it comes to the furthering of space exploration?
Okay, Dr. Oyewole, you can respond to both.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the wonderful questions. And then let me start from the last two questions. And I think my response will be that space will not solve our political problem. And that's the most important thing we have to live with. Space is to support, but it will not solve human problem. It's not an artificial intelligence that will replace or that will possibly act to support directly. It has to be, and that's why the word utilitarianism is very critical. You may have the asset. The extent at which you utilize the asset is a question that also matter. When you have the asset, of what benefit, what's the extent that you are extracting the benefit that you are supposed to extract from that particular asset. So it's very critical. But the issue of someone attacking a place or armed conflict that we continue to experience in different parts of Africa, from DRC, Congo, down to Mozambique, to Mali, Nigeria, Somalia, and the rest of them, those institutions will not fix or will not be fixed by space, because space is just there to support our actions and our decisions. So when we decide to make wrong decision, space technology will not correct our erroneous decision. I make this example, for instance. Nigeria has satellite data that can support urban and regional planning in many parts of the country. However, most local governments that are in charge of urban and regional planning don't have access to the space agency, not because the access is denied or because the space agency is not accessible, but because they don't access the space agency. It's the responsibility of the space agency to gather the data, and on request to supply the data to whoever is interested, any government department. Or you as a government department, for instance, if you are the Defense Department coordinator in charge of certain decision, it's your responsibility to contact the relevant agency to get what they have. When there are high-profile cases, like an attack, in most cases, the space agency can approach you that we can offer you this. But it's not in all cases that the space agency will know what the Ministry of Education or what the Ministry of Agriculture need from them. Sometimes this agency have to approach, and that's why my book emphasized issue of politics and policy. The politics, the interagency politics itself within these countries are so important. So that when there is certain capability in one agency, it is the responsibility of other agencies to connect with that capability to advance their interest. So, but the space program will not address all our problems. The concern around exploration, mining, and all those stuff in DRC and so many other countries are there, both legal and illegal. But the question is, our leaders across the continent, do they have the political will to actually tackle these challenges? When the political will is missing, there's no capability that you have that can address the problem.
Okay, Dr. Oyewole, I think you've addressed. I really like to respond to Harrison because of time. Sorry.
Okay.
His question around issue of energy. I think
Okay.
Harrison's question.
Okay, I thought he's the one that asked the question around extraction, and that's why I'm trying to.
Oh, okay.
He asked his question.
Okay.
He asked his
Go ahead,
question
sorry.
around extraction. So I started from the last question.
Okay. Go ahead.
So in time of energy support, until we fix our politics, space will not fix our politics. However, space data can actually support decision making to identify illegal mining around the continent. The biggest concern is now about illegal mining, because I think in that case, our government decided to sign those off by signing the contract with those companies that are involved. But illegal mining is more draining for Africa. In terms of illegal mining of gold and diamond and so many other resources across the continent, is more draining. And that's why the wealth disparity continue to widen between the global north and the global south. Most of the resources that we have in Africa are used to develop, extracted in an inhumane manner, because in most cases, some of the way that some of these illegal resources are extracted out of the continent and so cheaply to some of these countries undermine the development agenda of the continent. So space capability can support decision-making to counter illegal mining and support energy, just energy transition. Because what we have now is not just energy transition. The wind turbine and then solar panel and the rest of them that are produced in China and the rest of the world, most of the resources that are used for constructing or building those tech are from Africa. Most of them are extracted illegally. So the political problem has to be fixed to actually get that right. On the issue of the use of Nigerian space capability for the war against Boko Haram and the rest of them, Nigeria has a number of satellites, but in time of the security requirement of the country, we actually have limited capacity. Our satellites are not always overhead, and the resolution of some of these satellites are limited for military and security action or decision. So in most cases, the military have to rely on other sources or other means to actually support this. Beyond that, there are certain things that are political in Nigeria that are more political than technical. Certain people that have been arrested as members of Boko Haram, some of them have been released. And then repentant Boko Haram and militants in some cases are better paid than security personnel. So when you consider some of these factors, they are far beyond the issue of space supporting us. It's about fixing the political undercurrent that lubricate some of these conflicts. So, but in any case, space can support our military to perform their action, as well as our other security forces. And that has been displayed on many cases. In many occasions, the Nigerian Space Agency, either the Civil Space Agency or the military arm, have supported the operation of the Nigerian military and other security agency on so many occasions.
Thank you, Dr. Oyewole. Because I want us to round up now, but I want to see whether I can just chip in one very last question, if you can respond briefly. Because one of the purpose of this program is to encourage writing. We don't have many, well, maybe we have articles, but when it comes to books relating to space, especially when it comes to these arts or humanities, that's policy, politics, and things like that, we don't have many books in that line. So I would want to try to encourage that. So maybe the last question would be, what challenges did you have when you were writing this book? And for any aspiring author, what advice will you have for such person? Very briefly.
Okay, the major, some of the challenges including funding, because gathering data require funding, especially for new entrants like myself. I still have to learn the basic, given that I don't have the background in the technicalities of some of these high tech, the details in science and tech, as well as in military. So gathering some of those data are quite challenging. And sometimes you have access to certain information that you use that you know you can't make public. So it's another thing, especially when you are writing on something that is sensitive to national security. You have to be very careful not to run into problem. So there are so many data you have access to, or that you have someone that have access to them that you can't disclose. So these are concerns when it comes to writing, especially from policy perspective. It's easier to write when you are writing pure science. You may not run into trouble if it does not have security implication. But when it have security dimension, you have to be very careful what to the data you use, and when sometimes you have access to certain data, as I mentioned earlier. But funding was a major problem, and that's why I decided to limit the work to Nigeria and South Africa rather than taking the whole continent as a whole. Again, at that point, my exposure is still limited in time of the network. Now, if I want to do similar study, it will be easier for me to contact Dr. Etim, can you get me someone somewhere? But now, compare then, the network of people I can contact are limited. And again, sometimes you contact some people, they tell you, they will not even reply you. So those are some of the challenges that new entrants may also face in this area. Non-responsive, targeted research participants who you would like to hear their own side of the story, but they are not available. Is a major subject of concern. So these are some of the challenges I faced during the writing. And again, I had other responsibility and other research area, other pressing matter that actually took a lot of time to complete the project. So
Any advice for writers, any aspiring writer or something?
And I will just encourage any aspiring writer to just find time to sit down and put it on pen and paper. There's no amount of thing that you know. Nobody will measure them from your head. You have to put them in pen and paper or type them out and send them out one day, and then allow someone to actually help you read and provide feedback. And I would like to appreciate Annelies, the editor of Southern Space Series. She was practically on my neck to complete the project because at a point I lost interest in the project, but she was always there to follow up, and uh, at a point she was practically pushing me to complete the project, and our effort actually pay off in completing the project. So I really like to acknowledge her for that.
In terms of publishing houses, what are your thoughts? Because yeah, this was by Southern Space Studies.
Yes.
I don't know how they operate, whether it's are you giving any honorarium or something, or how does it work? And then which other publishing houses are there? I know your other book you publish it with Oxford. So are there publishing houses maybe within Africa or outside that we have to? How do we go about that?
I think there are so many publishers that you can contact. Depending on what you are writing, you need to search for the right series for your work and the right editor that will pick interest in your work. Again, issue of honorarium will be negotiated in person. In most cases, there's always those non-disclosure agreement part of the agreement, but then you have to negotiate that with your publisher depending on what you are negotiating. And again, past experience always matter when you are negotiating anything honorarium or any financial things with publisher or percentage. It matters because they will check your record and see, okay, this person is likely to attract markets. They use your past record to judge the market value of what you are producing, and again, the timeliness of the subject matter. They look at the market size and all those stuff. So many factors are to be considered before while negotiating or discussing issue of honorarium. So
Thanks, Dr. Oyewole. I know I see one or two other questions in the chat box, but we'll have to stop for now. And I know there may be some other questions around the issue of publishing. So if you don't mind, would you like to share your email in case anybody wants to reach you for counsel or advice?
yeah, my email, I can drop my
Yeah, if you can
email
drop it in the chat box.
chat box. Let me just give you Samuel Oyewole at up.ac.za.
Okay, thanks a lot, Dr. Oyewole, and thanks everyone for joining the discussion. Apologies to those who had only one or two questions that I couldn't bring up because of time. But Dr. Oyewole has dropped his emails. You can always reach him for discussion on the topic on maybe the book or any other. The book is available on Amazon. I got it mine from Amazon. And it's a very good book, very good research. I think it's a very nice book. Thanks a lot. Thanks everyone. I think we'll adjourn for now and hope to see you again next month when we have this book cafe again. Have a good rest of the day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.